Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Today with Dr. Wendy. Today is the official day after New Year's Day, and my co host Larry Dersham and I are delighted to be spending it with you. We would love to know what your favorite New Year's resolutions are going to be this year. Because let's face it, this is a year like no other. I'm willing to bet that there is a theme, perhaps, that is running rampant this year that we haven't seen before. What do we normally do January 1st? There's this common theme of deprivation, thou shalt not. I don't know a lot of people that are in the mood for a thou shalt not list this year. I have a feeling that many of us are planning to add, not subtract, to indulge, not to abstain, in order to make up for time lost in 2020. So if you are not in the mood to give up all of your favorite foods and drinks and exercise routines or lack thereof, I have a feeling you are in good company. So let's maybe focus a little more on how we might uniquely tailor those 2021 resolutions to maybe make up for what we missed in 2020. And I'll give you a couple of suggestions that I have been tossing around and that I've written about in my Psychology Today column, because specific goals predict success. Not, I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to drink less, I'm going to exercise more. I mean, those are our goals every day, let's face it. But maybe we can think of a couple of things that we maybe let go by the wayside in 2020, not because we didn't want to do them, but because we were focused on staying healthy, keeping our jobs, and everything else that we struggled with. So I have four of them for you. The first one is health, but I mean it in a little bit different sense. Many people skipped all of their routine medical appointments in 2020, all their unnecessary procedures because they were afraid of getting COVID. Now, why might they do it now? Well, even if they're not yet vaccinated or even necessarily on the list, think about COVID protocols and how far we've come between now and the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, we are masked, gloved, sanitized, socially distanced. You go into a store, it's a sea of plexiglass. We know a lot more about how to protect ourselves and our own health than ever before. So it's probably safer, at least, to take care of our own health so that we can help others. Just like they say when the oxygen masks come down in an airplane, take care of yourself so you'll be able to take care of other people. So following on the heels of health, of course, is wealth. Now, it's true, we saved a lot of money, didn't we? We didn't dine out, we didn't shop, or at least we didn't crawl through the mall looking for something to buy out of boredom. We didn't even buy gas, many of us who had the privilege and who were lucky enough to be able to telework. Now, the other side of that coin, of course, is that many people have been fired or furloughed due to pandemic closures, or they have jobs they just can't do remotely. So this year, maybe a resolution is to focus on finances, whether it is planning specific short-term steps or a smart fiscal strategy if you have money to invest. Maybe you have a surplus. Lucky you if that's true. So now here's the third one. You saw this one coming. Happiness. So we've got health, wealth, and happiness. Boost your New Year's mood by planning pleasure. What a concept. And what I mean by that is it can be as easy as scheduling quality time with your family. One thing the research has consistently shown along these lines are just having something on the horizon to look forward to that makes you smile. Whether or not you are anywhere near actually carrying it out gives us hope and gives us something to be happy about. And then, of course, the fourth one is kindness. That should be a resolution every year. Resolving to follow the golden rule by treating others the way you want to be treated. Here's the beauty of that. Let's say, God forbid, you were furloughed or did lose money. This one is free and provides an exponential return on your investment. Try it for a week. Make that your New Year's resolution and see if that isn't one that you want to keep. So focusing on a year to add, not subtract, focusing on goals that are both specific and special. We may actually this year, unlike years past, be encouraged and inspired to fulfill, for once, our New Year's resolution. Now, Larry, I know you probably have some of your own, and I'm willing to bet some of yours might revolve around some freedoms that we lost in 2020. What do you think?
Sure, Wendy. I guess I've been thinking a lot about maybe not resolutions, New Year's resolutions, but how about New Year revolution?
Nice.
But so I've been thinking a lot about, as many people have, the Georgia runoff election update. And of course, that's going to be on January 5th. That's this coming Tuesday. I mean, it is right up
Hard to
there.
believe.
And I know there's a lot of people knocking on doors down there. Even I've been asked, through social media, friends to come down there and so forth. We weren't able to get away and so forth. But it's really big because why is this so big? Georgia, for goodness sakes, that's on the East Coast. We're on the West Coast. Well, it's because whoever wins these runoff elections will control the Senate. Now, already the House is controlled by the Democrats. And if the Democrats win these two runoff election seats, they will control the Senate. And if perchance Joe Biden becomes our president, they will control the executive branch. They will control the legislative branch. Now, they control a lot of the federal courts as well, not all of them. As we know, the Supreme Court now has a majority of conservative justices and so forth. But just a little bit here. Kelly Loeffler, she's the Republican incumbent, versus Reverend Raphael Warnock. Okay, here's what Warnock believes. Unrestricted abortion. He says it's a human right. Military service. He said you can't serve God in the military too. And his own wife has accused him of being incredibly, well, abusive, I'll say. And you can pick that up on the social media where she's even actually talking about his behavior. He also was the head of a church camp where there was alleged child abuse, and he blocked it and was even arrested for thwarting the investigation into that church camp. He's praised communist dictator Fidel Castro and so on and so on. Okay, so that's Kelly Loeffler, the Republican, versus Mr. Warnock, the Democrat.
Isn't
On
it
the other
also
one,
expensive, Larry? I know one thing you and I have talked about offline is the inordinate amount of money that's being thrown at this particular campaign. First of all, is that true? And secondly, why so much money?
exactly. And the final one, just really quickly, David Perdue, the incumbent Republican, versus John Ossoff. The only thing I've been able to find on him, he's a very young guy in his 30s, but he's taken some money for his film company. He makes documentary films from a bank that has direct connections to the Communist Chinese Party. So just be that as it may. But this, to answer your question, Wendy, is the most expensive Senate race history in U.S. history, the most expensive ever. They are spending millions and millions of dollars because
Why?
this is for control of the Senate. And if there is control of the Senate by one party, just imagine what could be done in a negative way, in my view, a totally negative way. And I wouldn't want that to happen.
And isn't it
But
interesting, Larry, that this will occur? Talk about the control of the Senate and everything that's riding on this very high stakes, expensive two elections. The very next day, we've got January 6th, where people are absolutely out of their minds predicting what's going to happen, who's going to object. I mean, Mike Pence himself was sued this week. What are we going to expect there?
that's going to be huge. And that's the following day. That's January 6th, which is Wednesday. And, even 30% of the Democrats even acknowledged that there has been voter fraud has occurred, which is amazing. And I know there's the thing about the Dominion voting systems. There's all kinds of things about ballot stuffing and so forth and so on. But I think that the main thing here is that it's actually based in the constitutions, the election clause, Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1, that says voting laws in the states can only be changed by the legislatures. And there's at least 4 states, and these are all the battleground states, where they literally, in some cases, it was the board of electors. In other cases, it was the courts that changed election laws just before the election in violation of the Constitution of the United States. Now, that's what really concerns me, because the US Supreme Court refused to take that case.
That's right.
But I think that is going to be the basis. We all know there's all kinds of fraud, and we've seen videos of it and so forth. But I think the big one is that a number of states, at least 4, is that they violated the US Constitution. And I cannot imagine why the US Supreme Court would not pick that up. I mean, that's their duty.
Because they didn't, do you think that the legislators will pick it up on January 6th? I mean, after all, it's about ensuring the right thing is done, ensuring legal and legal votes are counted, illegal votes aren't. Do you think there are enough representatives, senators, enough people that'll be present at this joint resolution meeting on January the 6th to actually move the ball forward in terms of protesting, at least to where there's enough to have a debate, the electoral college results in any state?
Yeah, absolutely, there is. And in fact, if these four battleground states, they take away those electors because of all the abuses of the Constitution and so forth, that would put Biden below the 270 magic number.
Yes, it would, because one of them is Pennsylvania. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so there's a number of senators, Republican senators, and a much more large amount of House of Representative Republicans that are going to contest this. This is going to be something to watch, folks, on Wednesday, January 6th. And I think because Republicans have more state delegations than these Democrats, even though the Democrats have technically more representatives in the House of Representatives, we can still win this thing. And because go ahead.
That is a wonderful way to wrap that segment, because on the other side of the break, we are going to do the silver lining portion of our show. We'll be talking about new laws, and maybe one of those new laws will have to do with something that's going to go on January 6th. I don't know. You're going to have to stay with us to find out. You're listening to Today with Dr. Wendy. We will be back in a flash. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back to Today with Dr. Wendy. I'm Wendy Patrick. Well, we spent the first half talking some New Year's resolutions, some politics, and now we're going to segue into a little bit of a related topic, and that has to do with new laws. Now, let me just start by saying, if you've been following politics, you know that lawsuits and politics have been tied up together for as long as we've been discussing either one of them separately. You just can't talk about one without the other. And this week, the very last week of 2020, was an excellent example of what I mean. I talked about the short-lived lawsuit against Mike Pence. We've talked about the other short-lived lawsuits against different states and filed by different states. It's like everybody sues everyone. It's not quite that bad, but you'd think it was if you followed politics, because the two are tied so closely together. However, we in California also care very deeply about our new laws as well. And some of them, talk about the silver lining, which we always like to have during the second half of our show. Some of the new laws we have here are designed to give us what our resolutions are made of: health, wealth, happiness, kindness, everything that we just talked about the first half. And we're going to talk about a few examples of those that are particularly relevant to San Diegans. Because as we clinked our glasses Thursday night, ringing in the new year, we also rang in new laws. However, I'm used to doing segments at the beginning of the year talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new laws. We actually don't have as many this year. No doubt because of pandemic restrictions, we were not in session lawmaker-wise as much as we usually are. So we're going to highlight a couple of the big ones, even though we actually do have 372 of them. So there are a significant number. But some of them do go along the lines of keeping us healthy. And one of the ones I want to talk about is AB 685. We've spent a lot of time talking about this, both running up to the new year and since then, because this has to do with COVID, and it has to do with notification. In other words, you should be able to have both health and wealth. You should not have to choose between your life and your livelihood. So this particular assembly bill enhances an employer's obligation to report outbreaks of COVID among employees, not just to the local health authorities, but also to the workforce. Timing matters here. They have to do it within one business day. This is a law I always like to describe as addressing both signs and symptoms in a different sort of a spin. Where there have been symptoms, there must be signs. There must be signage indicating where have been outbreaks and what employees have to know and what their remedies might potentially be. I mean, how many times did we hear in 2020 of employees returning to the workplace only to find out after the fact there'd been an outbreak? And then whether or not they came down with COVID, they were terrified that not only had they contracted it, but maybe they took it home to loved ones. Maybe they lived with somebody who was immunocompromised or over 65. No more in 2021. Now there are very stringent notification requirements. Larry, I know that's something that is near and dear to your heart as well, because you also have family members that you want to make sure you don't transmit it to.
Yeah, I do. And it doesn't concern me that much. Truthfully, Wendy, what concerns me more is the closure of the businesses. And to me, I don't know if you saw this article, actually, it was a news story. Her name is Lindsey Graham, and she's in the state of Oregon, and she operates a beauty shop. She refused from the very beginning to close down her beauty shop. And the governor up there, I think her name is Governor Brown, really threatened her and sent out the child protective people to see if she was a good mother to her children, threatening from all different perspectives. Well, she's still maintaining her shop is open and she's going through these safety procedures, and not one case of COVID has showed up at her door. So I'm kind of, again, I'm more concerned about, and isn't it sad, Wendy, that we have to, this has been so politicized. Wouldn't it be wonderful if both sides would say, we want to get to the root of this cause, curing this disease, and we're not going to even bring politics anywhere close to it, because so many people, I think conservatives like me, don't trust the data. So much of it is being inflated, I think, for social purposes or political purposes, and it's so worrisome. I just want to get this disease behind us and move on and make our country great.
Well, one interesting trend along those lines is the argument you just made has actually been one that's been litigated in several different cases across the nation as small businesses make that exact same claim that you just outlined. Not a single case of COVID has ever been tied to our business. We have poured all of our life savings into COVID proofing our space, whether we're a salon or a restaurant or a bar or a gym or a church, whatever we do, we've made sure that nobody's going to catch it here. So then why can't we open? And we've also noticed in the last couple of days, no doubt our listeners have seen or heard all of the Walmarts, just as an example, that have had to close their doors because there have been COVID outbreaks. So you haven't heard the type of really looking at tying the data to the results. So I used to call it data-driven dining. I wanted to be able to eat at places that had never had a COVID case. We should have data-driven business operations, and that has been what some of the courts are actually looking at. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. I hate to say, as soon as everybody's out and vaccinated or herd immunity, whatever comes first, then we're probably going to get some of these court rulings. But we'll be in good shape 100 years from now for the next pandemic, right? Because they seem to be one every 100 years. Okay.
Right. I think so. And just really quickly, what I worry about, I've heard some people talking about this, like these lockdowns are working so well. If you want to control a group of people, this could morph into environmentalism, where, we don't have any carbon emissions now because everybody's been staying at home. Let's keep the people up. I'm serious. Look on the horizon.
Well,
I fear for that.
Where else it might lead along those lines, as you've been hearing about the vaccination passport, the vaccine passport
Yes.
you might need to travel. And,
yes.
As lawyers, Larry and I hate slippery slopes. So we worry that if we then become required to show proof of vaccination, then what else are we going to have to show proof of? What does that entail? Is it going to be a card that we swipe that has all of our personal information? Many people are concerned about this. Nobody wants to give up that many civil liberties when we might be able to do it more safely. So it's all a balance, Larry. And I know we talk about that a lot, but that has to be on the minds of many of these airlines, many hotels, businesses who are actually talking out loud about the fact that this might become a reality.
Oh, absolutely. It might. And there's a couple other interesting laws too. What was some of those others you had?
Well, one of the ones that you and I both have kept a close eye on is AB 979. That's the law that talks about inclusion and diversity on boards. Now,
Yes.
This continues the trajectory that we discussed several years ago, where if you had a board of a certain size, you had to have at least one woman on the board by the end of 2019. Now that actually that law has been expanded, and by the end of 2021, not only do you need a minimum of one woman, you may need more depending on the size of your board, but you also will need one member of an underrepresented community. That is anybody that self-identifies as Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Native Hawaiian, Alaska Native, or who self-identifies as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. This is the trajectory I would probably believe is going to continue, and it is one of the most talked about laws of 2021.
Right. Now, Wendy, I'm Pennsylvania Dutch, allegedly. So does that count as a minority?
I don't see it on the list, Larry. I don't see it on the list. I'm Romanian, and I don't see mine on the list either. But you raise a good question, because I did notice that conspicuously it talks about individuals who self-identify as being a member of one of these categories.
Now, how about the fines on that, though? $100,000 for the first violation and $300,000 for a second or subsequent violations.
We call that
Who
teeth.
can?
We call that teeth, Larry. This is a law with teeth, and that was one of the first things that jumped off the page at me, is that unlike many other laws that are almost couched as suggestions, although we know they're not, no laws are aspirational, we're supposed to follow them, but this law actually has the stiffest penalties I've seen in a long time. What do you think?
Totally. I think it's too much. I mean, if you're an Apple computer or Facebook, that would be nothing. But if you're a smaller business, that would be devastating financially. But, and here's another worrisome thing too about some of those categories in the area of sexual preference. I worry about the churches. Like if you have a big church, that could go against church doctrine, or even some of the mosques for our Muslim friends. It could go against them. So what will happen in that thing where you actually, those kind of decisions that will have to be made? It's going to be interesting.
Well, it is interesting, and it reminds me of the civil religious liberty arguments that we had when it comes to what types of restrictions, if any, that Christian-owned businesses can put on who they serve. And remember that the Supreme Court weighed in on those, and they seem to really sort of have a look at, well, what kind of business are you and what are you being asked to do? In other words, selling a product nobody had a problem with, but participating in a celebration that they didn't agree with, like baking the cake, that famous example.
Right.
Those were sort of along the lines of what they were looking at. But you bring up a very good point, in that that might be similar, or at least analogous, and to some extent, as to what people are looking at here.
Yeah. Wendy, how about the AB 2992? What about that? The victim's
Well, I'll
rights?
tell you, as a career prosecutor, this one is near and dear to my heart. Basically, it says that if you are a crime victim, you shouldn't be worried about your employer discriminating against you. And this is a law that actually expands the rights of stalking or domestic abuse victims from punitive employer actions for, listen to the language, unscheduled work absences as you seek medical care, psychological care, meet with victim advocates, whatever you need to do. This is highly significant, Larry, because first of all, you can't plan to be a victim of a crime.
Sure.
Nobody would plan that. And secondly, long gone are the days where we thought we could identify a domestic abuse victim in the workplace because he or she was going to show up wearing long sleeves in the middle of summer or dark glasses. Stalking leaves no marks. Being threatened, having your life threatened, leaves no marks. But the psychological trauma can be debilitating. So this is a very, very important law that we've been having our eye on. So those are three of the ones we wanted to mention, because the silver lining to all the new laws this year really is that they are geared to give us a better 2021. Imagine that. So with that happy ending, thank you for joining us. We want to wish you a wonderful, safe weekend. Please join us next week for more of Today with Dr. Wendy. Headlines with a silver lining. I'm Wendy Patrick. Have a great week, and God bless you.